It was around 10 at night, and a dog was barking loudly in front of a large mansion. Its barking echoed through the empty streets. Inside the grand mansion, Michael was alone. His parents had gone to a party, promising they would be back a little late. Michael sat quietly on the sofa, watching TV. The only sound in the entire house was the noise from the television. The eerie silence around him was slowly eating him up from the inside. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He slowly walked towards the door and opened it. But there was no one outside. Scared, he closed the door and went back to the sofa. Only a few moments had passed when he heard the sound of glass breaking from the kitchen. Gathering courage, Michael walked towards the kitchen. He found a broken glass lying on the floor. He convinced himself that a cat might have entered through the window. Brushing off the thought, he returned to the living room to continue watching TV.
Just as he sat down, the lights began to flicker. Within seconds, the entire house was plunged into darkness. The silence became heavier, and the darkness was so deep that Michael couldn't even see his own hands. Then, in the pitch-black room, he saw two glowing eyes staring at him from the darkness. His breath quickened. Suddenly, the lights came back on, and standing right in front of him was an old woman with long white hair covering her face.
Michael's body froze in fear. Before he could react, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself in a hospital bed. His parents stood beside him with worried expressions. They told him they had found him lying on the floor when they returned home. But what shocked Michael the most was when his parents revealed that many years ago, an old woman had been murdered in that mansion. And since then, her restless spirit was said to wander the halls. Michael now lives in a different house, but whenever he remembers that terrifying night, his whole body trembles with fear.
John lived with his father in South Africa. His mother had passed away years ago, and his father was often away for work. One day, when his father returned home, he was unusually happy. He told John that he had been transferred to America, and in 3 days, they would be moving. After arriving in America, they moved into a small rented house. However, John's father's office was far away, so he would come home late at night, leaving John alone for most of the day. One evening, while John was sitting alone, he felt like someone else was in the house. He brushed off the feeling until he heard the faint sound of a child laughing from outside. But when he looked around, the yard was empty. The boy had vanished. Confused, John turned to go back inside, but before he could, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. His heart started pounding. Slowly, he turned around, and there stood the boy, just inches away from him. With a faint, chilling voice, the boy whispered, "I called you to kill you." Before John could scream, the boy lunged at him, pushing him to the ground. John's heart raced as the boy's pale hands reached for his throat. Just then, headlights flashed from the driveway. John's father had returned home. The boy immediately disappeared into thin air, leaving John gasping for breath. When John's father asked the landlord about the house, he learned that the property was built over an old cemetery. The father and son moved out the very next day. Even now, whenever John remembers that night, he lies awake, haunted by the memory of the ghostly child who wanted to take his life.